Welcome to episode 255 of the Brainy Business, understanding the psychology of why people buy. Today's episode is showcasing the best of the Brainy Business in 2022. Ready? Let's get started.
You are listening to the Brainy Business Podcast, where we dig into the psychology of why people buy and help you incorporate behavioral economics into your business, making it more brain-friendly. Now here's your host, Melina Palmer.
Hello, everyone. My name is Melina Palmer, and I want to welcome you to the Brainy Business Podcast. I hope sincerely that 2022 was as great of a year for you as it was for me. Personally, it was a fantastic year. The Brainy Business had a great year. And, I love to celebrate and reflect and look back. So really quickly, as we kick off this best of episode, here are some of my best moments and memories from the year. First, I traveled to Amsterdam to speak at the fantastic IIEX Europe conference. Thank you, Greenbook. I also launched my second book, What Your Employees Need and Can't Tell You, at an in-person event and book signing, which is something I wasn't able to do when What Your Customer Wants and Can't Tell You came out in 2021 for obvious reasons. So that was really, really cool. Thank you to Next Up for putting on that event at the beautiful Sam's Club Auditorium in Bentonville, Arkansas. It was really cool to be able to be there and experience that new book with everyone. I was also honored to be a runner-up in 3 categories of the Habit Weekly Awards this year, including Podcast of the Year, YouTube Channel of the Year, and Content Person of the Year, which is just amazing. And I was an honoree on Greenbooks Future List, as well as the ESOMAR Insights250 list. So thank you. I'm really in awe for all of that. So for everyone who had a part in that, whether, I don't know what it would have been, over 5,000 people voted in the Habit Weekly Awards, and for any of it, just cool. And thank you so much. I also continued teaching this year, which has been a lot of fun. I added a class on the advanced concepts of behavioral economics within the certificate program, which I'm really proud of, and students have really been seeming to enjoy. We're in the second stint of that right now, which is actually just going to be starting next week for when this episode comes out. But whenever you listen, definitely go check out information about that certificate through Texas A&M. There's a link for you in the show notes. Something else cool, we started testing out a second episode per week this year, which has been really cool. That came out in tandem with the book launch in October. So we've had really a full quarter's worth of that and are testing it out right now. It's seeming to be well received. We'll definitely keep trying it for a couple months at least as we see how people feel about it. So let me know what you think. If you like it and want it to stick around, or prefer the old way, or have other thoughts, whatever they are, I'm always happy to hear from listeners. This show is for you after all. So definitely let me know. You can find me as The Brainy Biz pretty much everywhere across the socials, or you can always email Melina at thebrainybusiness.com. I also got to meet and connect with some really amazing people. 46 of them came on the show as guests in 2022. And that meant I got to read a bunch of really great books and papers and learn about what's going on in the field and various fields and aspects of everything that's going on in brain science and other areas of application in business. It's just really one of my favorite things in the work that I get to do. And it's weird. It feels weird to call it work or a job because as cliche as it may sound, it really doesn't feel like either of those things. While this is my job, that word doesn't really do it justice. This is a passion. It's a choice. It's a life I've built, and I love all the learning I'm entrusted with each day, the new books I get to read before they hit the shelves, people I get to connect with from around the world who trust me with their stories and to help share it with all of you. I'm so lucky, honestly, and just honored for this life. And I love every minute of it. And I'm just really excited for what's coming out in 2023, just keep building and moving forward. But before we get to that, we need to look back and celebrate the best of 2022. So how do we determine what's the best Around here, I go based on downloads. That means you choose what the best content is by what you choose to listen to throughout the year. In the past, I've done the top 10 of the year as well as a top 10 of all time in one episode, but that gets a little bit long. So to shake things up and avoid a paradox of choice problem as you look back and say, what do I want to listen to now? We're just going to do the top 10 most downloaded episodes of 2022 in this episode today. I'm going to have a separate episode for the top 10 of all time later on in the year. Feels like a good way to celebrate the 5-year anniversary of the podcast, which is coming up in July. Can you believe it? 5 years? Me either, but I think that's a good time to do our next all-time downloads list. So keep an eye and ear out for that. One more tweak to the mix this year is that I've created a post with all the books featured in the podcast in the past year. We've had so many amazing guests, and I want to make it easy for you to see all those books in one place. So there's a link to that as well as the top 10 episodes profiled in this conversation today, all waiting for you in the show notes for the episode, which are found both within the app you're listening to and at thebrainybusiness.com/255. As I've said, it's been quite a year. And before I dig into that top content, I always start these best of episodes by taking a moment to thank you, all of you, for listening, subscribing, sharing, connecting on social media, reaching out to let me know your wins and the behavioral economics concepts you've applied in your own businesses. Those are some of my favorite messages to get. I love hearing from you both inside the Be Thoughtful Revolution and across social media. So please do continue to reach out. In 2022, I heard from listeners all over the world, from Israel, South Africa, India, Peru, Turkey, Saudi Arabia, Croatia, and so many more countries. Wherever you are, if you love the podcast and behavioral economics, please do reach out through your favorite social app or join the Be Thoughtful Revolution. Love to have you in there to let me know who you are. I love connecting with each of you, and it really is me responding. I read all my emails and all those posts and love to connect with you all. Even if it takes a little while sometimes, know I will get back to you. You can find me on the socials again as the Brainy Biz and as Melina Palmer on LinkedIn. Again, there are links to all that in the show notes to make it easy. In 2022, the show had more than 250,000 downloads, 250,000 downloads from 178 countries, which is amazing. Thank you to everyone from Albania to Zimbabwe who has listened to the podcast this year. So let's take a moment and talk about those top downloads by country. Probably not surprisingly, the US is first by a pretty considerable margin. However, international downloads make up almost half of the downloads the show gets year after year, 48% of them year to date. So please do know that wherever you're listening, you matter to me. Thank you. Back to our top 10, the US is followed by the UK, Canada, and Australia, which have remained the top 4 pretty much since the podcast started. India is 5th, followed by Germany. And then we get into some new territory. South Africa has made some progress and moved up from the 9th most downloads in 2021 to being 7th in the world in 2022. Thank you to all our listeners in South Africa for downloading and tuning in. We then have Spain, which had made the top 10 for the first time last year and have continued climbing the charts to the number 8 spot. So thank you, Spain. They are followed by Mexico, where I have some students and clients, so that makes sense. And for the first time in the top 10, we have Taiwan, a very cool new addition to that top 10 list, who just edged out Brazil, who's in our number 11 spot. So thank you all for downloading. And thank you as well to France, the Netherlands, Ireland, United Arab Emirates, Sweden, Switzerland, Singapore, Slovakia, and Denmark, who round out our top 20 countries or areas for downloads. Wherever you are in the world, whatever country you're listening from, thank you. I appreciate you so much and can't wait to see how things shape up in 2023. And because the bulk of the downloads are here in the US, I want to acknowledge the top 10 states as well. Some of these have more downloads than some of the top 10 countries, so I want to be sure to mention them by name. The top 2 states with downloads are the same. They have been year after year after year. But we have a lot of other movement this year in the top 10, which is always fun. So coming in at number 10 with the most downloads of 2022 is Virginia. And we then have Massachusetts at number 9. Massachusetts is new to the top 10, so welcome. Perhaps that's thanks to Matt Johnson and Tessa Mishazik, who were guests on the show this year talking about their great book, Branding That Means Business, and who both teach at Harvard. Wherever you heard about the show, Massachusetts, thank you and welcome. We have Georgia, who I gave an honorable mention to last year because they were number 9 on the all-time downloads, but didn't quite make the 2021 top list. So welcome back, Georgia, at number 8. We then have Florida at number 7 and Ohio holding out the number 6 spot again this year. And now, for the first time ever, my home state of Washington has been kicked out of the top 3. Washington is our number 5 spot and has been passed by New York at number 4, and then Illinois, which was previously number 7 and has zoomed up to the state with the 3rd most downloads in 2022. There were some amazing guests from the University of Chicago this past year, including Ayelet Fishback and John List, and I've done some trips to speak at conferences in Chicago and have made some other connections there. So it's very cool to see the traction and welcome the entire state of Illinois to the top 3. And of course, congratulations to New York for continuing to hold on to that number 4 spot for another year. Considering that meant edging out Washington down to 5, it's quite an achievement. And once again, we continue to have Texas at 2 and California still with the top most downloads of 2022. I believe they've both held on to those spots really since the beginning, 5 years ago almost when the show started. So thank you again, everyone who's listening, wherever you are. I would love to connect and learn more about you. So please do share where you're listening from and where we hang out on social media. You can find me again as the Brainy Biz. So now that we've thanked you and talked about all the amazing places where you're tuning in, let's talk about the episodes you have been listening to the most in the past year. As I said, the show had more than 250,000 downloads in 2022, with numbers consistently 50% higher than in 2021. So that's just been really amazing to watch. With 249 episodes of content to choose from across the whole year, we get our top 10 episodes of the year. And that starts with episode 196 and my interview with Priscilla McKinney of Little Bird Marketing. Priscilla has become one of my favorite people since we first connected. I don't even remember exactly when we first started chatting on social media. I believe the first time I specifically remember her name was via LinkedIn when I was the MC for the You Better Behave event, which was put on virtually by Behaviorally, Protobrand, and Maru in 2021. Whenever it was, I'm so glad that it happened and that we kept in touch. Priscilla is delightful and got her degree in anthropology. She applies her insights about people and human nature to market insights and marketing. In this episode, we talked about how anthropology and marketing really do go together and the importance of long relationships, both on social media and in real life. When we were both speaking in Amsterdam this past summer, one of her talks was about treating LinkedIn like a cocktail party. And it was so perfectly executed, a really great analogy and something that I've been keeping in mind as I've been having, chats across social media or just any connections you have with people. Ask good questions. Don't come in. She talked about to not pitch slap people, which is another of my favorite phrases of the year. I really just enjoy Priscilla, and I'm sure you will too. And that's why it's no surprise that her episode 196 with Priscilla McKinney on anthropology, market research, and behavioral economics came in at that 10th most downloaded episode of the year. And if you're interested in human behavior and having better content that really resonates with people, you're going to love this next one. Episode 201, called Creating Content People Can't Help But Engage With, was featuring Caitlin Burgoyne, and her episode is next on the list. Caitlin definitely lives the relationship first aspects of business and marketing. She has the Why We Buy newsletter, which has tens of thousands of subscribers. And she recently hit 100,000 followers on Twitter in 2022. Congratulations, Caitlin. And it's just been amazing to watch her blossom and take over the world in 2022. She started really posting on LinkedIn, I'd say, halfway through the year. And according to a post that she did toward the end of the year, after 4 months of posting regularly, she was named one of the top 200 LinkedIn creators. Caitlin is amazing and so unbelievably good at what she does. And the thing is, she shares it all with you everywhere. She really understands people and is telling you all her tricks, which are not really tricks at all. It's just showing up and being consistent and putting out good content that people want to read and engage with. We talked in her episode about her newsletter and how the content she creates is giving away just the right amount to get her ideal clients coming back and wanting to learn more from her. And then when they need what she sells, which is not the same as what she gives out for free, they know exactly where to go. Such a great person and a fantastic episode. Be sure to check out number 201 with Caitlin Burgoyne. Follow her on LinkedIn and Twitter. Subscribe to her newsletter. Links for all that in the show notes for her episode. You'll be glad you did, I promise. And just as a quick side note, I never know who's new to the show. This could be your first episode, in which case, welcome, of course. And whether it's your first or your 255th time here, I want to make sure you know that the URLs for the episodes are always set up so that the episode number makes it really easy to go find it once you know this sort of system. So when I say that Caitlin's episode is 201, you can know that you can just go type in thebrainybusiness.com/201 and it'll take you right there. Or Priscilla's is thebrainybusiness.com/196, and this one is /255. It's really easy. That's why I know so many of the episode numbers by heart. It kind of freaks people out sometimes, but I can always list the top ones because I recommend them and talk about them so often. So if you're following along and making notes, you can just write the episode number. You don't have to remember those titles, and they can be really easy to grab. So hopefully that's a helpful little tidbit as you go. And again, there's links in the show notes to make it even easier. So let's keep going down our list. We are now at number 8, which is episode 192, called AI, Blockchain, Machine Learning, and Behavioral Economics with Manoj Agrawal. The intersection of human behavior and technology, specifically with AI and machine learning, have been a big topic of conversation in the past few years. Are they opposites or do they go together? Do they play nicely, or should you just invest in one? Will machine learning and AI kill the need for behavioral science? These are questions people often ask, and a big focus of this conversation with Manoj. In case you aren't familiar with him, his work has been publicly praised by both Bill Gates and Barack Obama, so he's doing amazing things. Check out the 8th most downloaded episode of 2022 on AI, blockchain, and machine learning with Manoj. That's episode 192. We also talk about meditation and mindfulness, which is one of my very favorite things. I think you'll like that as well. And that brings us to the 7th most downloaded episode of the year, episode 190, The Voltage Effect with John List. I feel like it's probably going to get old to have me constantly saying, John is amazing, Caitlin's amazing, Priscilla's amazing. But it's super true. I'm going to try to stop, but no, everyone is amazing. And all the guests have done such fantastic work. So John is a professor at the University of Chicago. he co-authored The Y-Axis with Uwe Ganizi. He's going to be on the show in a couple of months talking about his new book, which is really exciting. Oh man, you're going to love that one too. But I'm going to stay focused. John was previously the chief economist at Uber before taking on the same role at Lyft, which was where he was when I interviewed him early last year. And since then, he's moved on to be the chief economist at Walmart. I can't wait to see what he and his team are going to do there. John was on the show talking about his book, The Voltage Effect, How to Make Good Ideas Great and Great Ideas Scale. This is such an interesting and applicable book that helps you to see the rules of scaling. As John says, while not everything or every business needs to scale to be successful, if you want to scale, there are some very specific things that need to happen and things that will keep it from happening, which he lays out in a really beautiful way in the book. One of my favorite tips from this one is to not tuck away problems that you see and ignore them, but rather if you see a thread sticking out somewhere on your metaphorical sweater of a project or business idea, you need to pull at it. Pull at it before someone else does, or it unravels you from the inside. While Annie Duke's episode about her book Quit didn't make the top 10 of the year, potentially because it came out kind of late, I do think that this one is so well aligned with this. So if you're interested in this area of understanding how to scale and the importance of quitting ideas early, I also recommend episode 227 with Annie Duke, along with episode 190 featuring John List and The Voltage Effect. Next on our list is 187, Motivation and Incentives at Work with Kurt Nelson. Kurt is one of my favorite people and a co-host of Behavioral Grooves with Tim Houlihan. We finally met in person in 2022 at the IIEX Behavior Conference in Chicago. Kurt has been a guest lecturer in my internal communication and change management class and has done a talk with Tim inside the Be Thoughtful Revolution. And he's just a master on incentives and motivation. Some of his work with Tim is featured in my new book, What Your Employees Need and Can't Tell You, as well. In his episode, Kurt really digs in on this all-important conversation of helping people to be motivated at work and understanding the nuance of incentives and motivation. Not all incentives are monetary, even though we often go there first, but there's so much value in understanding them all and how they go together and what it can do to either help or hinder teams. We talk about incentives in a remote environment, the importance of communication and behavioral audits, and Kurt gives some podcasting tips because he and Tim are constantly winning awards for their great work together. So good. Check out episode 187 with Kurt Nelson on motivation and incentives. And then, if you've ever taken or considered creating an online course, you must listen to episode 193, How to Make Online Courses People Enjoy and Actually Complete, with Chris Rawlinson of 42 Courses. Chris has another awesome newsletter, which I highly recommend, gives lots of fun facts along with their insights from all the great courses they provide there at 42 Courses. Did you know that the average online course has a 10% completion rate? Most courses aren't made with the completion or human behavior in mind, but 42 Courses is different. And their completion rates are over 80%. Compared to 10% in the industry, it's amazing. Chris shared in his episode some of his tips and insights, including the gem that learning should be a fun, interactive journey of discovery. I couldn't agree more, Chris. And 42 Courses is all about making learning fun and nudging people to keep them going and enjoying their time in the course and getting all the great value out of it. And that's potentially why his episode was the 5th most downloaded of the year. If you haven't listened yet, definitely check out episode 193 with Chris Rawlinson on making online courses people enjoy and complete. And yes, you'll learn why it's 42. Now, moving on to the 4th most downloaded episode of the year is 197. You Have More Influence Than You Think with Vanessa Bonds. Influence was a big theme this year, as you'll hear from the number 3 most downloaded episode in a minute as well. Vanessa's book, You Have More Influence Than You Think, is such an interesting read, full of research and insights into how people behave. Her work and that of others showcased in the book look at so many of these kind of funny quirks of human nature. For instance, how we may think everyone's looking at us when we have a stain on our shirt or are wearing something that makes us uncomfortable. But when everything is normal, we don't think people notice us at all. It turns out people don't really notice us as much as we think, but they also notice us much more than we think. Understanding this balance and which sides it's really on is super helpful in life and in work. In this episode, we talked quite a bit about how the audience can influence the speaker on a stage and what to do to have more influence in virtual meetings, including tips for the introverts out there. It's a great book and a really fun episode. No surprise that it landed that number 4 spot on the download list. And speaking of influence, did you know that it's a superpower? Zoe Chance was on in episode 189 sharing about her fantastic book, Influence is Your Superpower. And that episode is our 3rd most downloaded of the year. I absolutely love Zoe, and I love this book. She and I have gotten to be friends over this past year, and I'm so glad that she wrote this book because it was the catalyst that made it all possible. Zoe teaches the most popular course at the Yale School of Management, and that course became the basis of her internationally best-selling book, Influence is Your Superpower, which we discussed in the episode. 2 standouts for me in this book are The Power of Saying No and Zoe's 24 Hours of No challenge. We feel like saying no is the worst thing that could ever happen. It feels so hard to say no to people, but when we ask people for things, we often expect that they're going to say no. So why does that even happen? Why do we feel so different? And how do we have such a hard time asking people for things and then saying no? Zoe really digs in on that within the book and our conversation. I also made sure we talked about her magic question of what would it take and how to use that in life and business. So powerful, so fantastic. Thank you so much, Zoe, for joining me on the show. And congratulations on having the 3rd most downloaded episode of the year. And that brings us to the 2nd most downloaded episode of 2022, our only non-interview in the top 10. This was episode 198 on the Dunning-Kruger effect. What a fun episode and concept. I love that this one made it into the top and all the way to the 2nd most downloaded episode of the year, which is awesome. If you haven't heard this one yet, or even if you have, it warrants a listen. Add 198 to your list of episode numbers to check out and put it on the top because this one is so valuable. Essentially, the Dunning-Kruger effect looks at the interesting relationship of confidence and competence, and how when we know very little about something or have low competence, we have ridiculously high confidence. But once we get a little more competence and we start to see all that we don't know, confidence tanks. And it's a slow build back up to get it back as we learn more. And we often never recover fully to the crazy high level of confidence we had when we didn't know very much at all. The terms in this one are some of my favorite. It talks about being on the peak of Mount Stupid at the beginning, and then you fall into the valley of despair as that competence increases enough to shatter confidence. Think about all the high school graduates who know everything, but then go to college and say, whoa. Or again, when starting a job or learning about a new area of expertise. In the episode, I give you specific tips for things like coaching team members and knowing when they're most likely to listen to your advice instead of shrugging it off thinking they know everything, but how you need to balance and be sure you don't overwhelm them so no progress gets made in that critical, fleeting, perfect moment. Of course, the Dunning-Kruger effect was featured in What Your Employees Need and Can't Tell You, and it was one of my favorite solo episodes of the year, so I'm really delighted that it got a spot on this top 10 list. While all the episodes are my babies, I will say that another one I really loved, which I wish would have made the top list, but also came out just a couple of months ago, so hasn't had that rumination time, was number 220 on the Cobra effect. This ties in with incentives and motivation, like Kurt Nelson was talking about in his episode, and shows how no loophole goes unexploited. So it is important to think through all the ins and outs and ups and downs and everything of incentives and incentive programs to ensure they don't completely backfire and that you end up with a country full of cobras, like what happened in the original story of the Cobra effect. So while 220 didn't make this top 10 list, I would put the Cobra effect episode on your Melina highly recommends list, and it is in the linked episodes for this one's show notes, along with episode 198 on the Dunning-Kruger effect, which was the second most downloaded episode of 2022. And you know what that means? We've made it to the most downloaded episode of the year. Are you ready? It is 186. Get It Done with Ayelet Fishback. I'm so delighted that this episode and book top our list. Ayelet is so wonderful. She and I were able to meet up in person when I was in Chicago this past year. We had a lovely tea and a chat. Thank you, Ayelet, for making the time. And she was kind enough to come back for an episode with Cassie Holmes a couple weeks ago on making 2023 the best year ever. So if you haven't listened to 249 yet, you should add that one to your growing list as well. Ayelet is an expert in motivation, and her book, Get It Done, came out at the beginning of 2022. She gives tips and insights into the science of motivation to understand how you will be most likely to complete your goals and get more, better things done. Her book talks about the value of setting the right goals and in the right way. She starts with a story of a group climbing Everest and how the relentless pursuit of goals can sometimes come at our own detriment. So it isn't about getting things done just for the sake of doing them. Summiting Everest, if you don't make it home, isn't really worth it. Instead, looking at goals in a new way and setting them up so you will complete them in the right way is the focus of this book. She's so good at phrasing things too. When she was just on in that episode with Cassie Holmes, she said two things that really stuck with me. First, you don't want to be the one who did a thing. You want to be the one who's doing it. And she also said that a year has a very long middle when sharing that you shouldn't set year-long goals, but instead look on a shorter timeline to increase your chances of success. Really, really smart, great tidbits and tips. Love it. Great way to end our list. Definitely check out episode 186 with Ayelet Fishback on her book, Get It Done. Considering this episode is coming out right around the time of Quitter's Day, which is when most people will have given up their resolutions, even though it's only January 20th when this comes out, seems like a good time to refresh your motivation by listening to this great episode with Ayelet, the number one most downloaded episode of 2022. And while there are those links to all the episodes in the show notes, here's a recap of that top 10 list one more time in case you're taking notes. Episode 196, Anthropology, Market Research, and Behavioral Economics with Priscilla McKinney. Episode 201, Creating Content People Can't Help But Engage With, featuring Caitlin Burgoyne. Episode 192, AI, Blockchain, Machine Learning, and Behavioral Economics with Manoj Agarwal. Episode 190, The Voltage Effect, How to Make Good Ideas Great and Great Ideas Scale with John List. Episode 187, Motivation and Incentives at Work with Kurt Nelson. Episode 193, How to Make Online Courses People Enjoy and Complete with Chris Rawlinson of 42 Courses. Episode 197, You Have More Influence Than You Think with Vanessa Bonds. Episode 189, Influence is Your Superpower with Zoe Chance. Episode 198, The Dunning-Kruger Effect. And a shout out to episode 222 on the Cobra Effect. And our most downloaded episode of the year, episode 186, Get It Done with Ayelet Fishback. Thank you everyone who's been a guest on the show this year. Thank you to everyone for listening and downloading. And thank you for the amazing content and things that people are putting out into the world that I've been able to bring and feature on the show. The research and work people are doing, it really is fantastic. While there is a link, as I mentioned at the beginning of the episode, to all the books featured on the show this past year, I do want to give a summary for you here. And while I'm not listing out the episode numbers again, there are in appearance order starting from the beginning of the year, which began with episode 186. So if you wanted to look between 186 and 249, if you were going to fish around yourself instead of using the post, that's a handy little guide. So here are those books and authors that you can be making mental note of before you go check out the post. So first is Get It Done by Ayelet Fishback. Influence is Your Superpower by Zoe Chance. The Voltage Effect by John List. Using Semiotics in Retail by Rachel Laws. You Have More Influence Than You Think by Vanessa Bonds. The Influencer, Brian Ahern. A More Beautiful Question by Warren Berger. Evolutionary Ideas by Sam Tatum. How Minds Change by David McRaney. The Behavioral Investor by Daniel Crosby. The Power of Regret by Dan Pink. Influence by Robert Cialdini. Behavioral Science in Marketing by Nancy Harhut. How to Have Difficult Conversations About Race by Kwame Christian. Quit by Annie Duke. Branding That Means Business by Matt Johnson and Tessa Mishazik. Solving Modern Problems with a Stone Age Brain by Douglas Kenrick and David Lundberg Kenrick. Behavioral Science in the Wild by Dilip Soman and Nina Mazer. Brain Meets World by Evan Nestorak and the team at Behavioral Scientist. A More Just Future by Dolly Chugh. And Happier Hour by Cassie Holmes. Of course, not all the guests had books that we talked about much on the episode, so I do want to take a moment to thank Alina Hallinan, Karina Montez, Maria Drago, Marco Palma, Jay Maddock, Emily Cadiz, Sarah Wilson, Greta Harper, Anat Sood, Agnes Steeb, William Hassanein, Chuck Howard, Beatrix Daros, Scott Schutte, Janine Steekter, Michael Halsworth, Phil Agnew, Lee Caldwell, and Luke Freeman for joining me on the show this past year as well. Wow. What an amazing lineup. What an epic year. I appreciate you all and can't wait to see what 2023 has in store. Right now, I'm most excited about speaking at South by Southwest, which is coming up in Austin in March. If you're planning to attend or are in that area, definitely reach out. And whatever else you want to share and connect about, wherever you are in the world, if you have ever thought, I bet Melina would think that's interesting, I know you're right. Come connect with me. Inside the Be Thoughtful Revolution is the best place to do that. There's a link in the show notes, of course. You can also find me on the socials as the Brainy Biz and Melina Palmer on LinkedIn. I can't wait to connect with you. And thank you again for making 2022 such an amazing year. Thank you for listening, subscribing, sharing, rating, and reviewing the Brainy Business Podcast. We wouldn't be here if it wasn't for you. So thank you, thank you, thank you. And just like that, episode 255 on the best of the Brainy Business in 2022 is done. Join me Tuesday to learn all about habits. It's going to be a lot of fun. You won't want to miss it. Until then, thanks again for listening and learning with me. And remember to be thoughtful.
Thank you for listening to the Brainy Business Podcast. Melina offers virtual strategy sessions, workshops, and other services to help businesses be more brain-friendly. For more free resources, visit thebrainybusiness.com.